to possibly be killed and possibly kill. I can't advocate that. I surely hear what you're saying, and I agree with the analysis. There's almost no price being paid. I've sometimes said, sure, reinstate the draft, start with people 45 and up. I also just read something kind of fanciful about orchestrating a draft so that only the privileged would be the ones who go and fight. So if the formulas got changed, but even so, but I still, myself, I'll never advocate training anybody to pick up a gun in any circumstance, anywhere, anytime. I think if the United States people could more directly feel the sorrow of war, now how would that ever happen? And you know, it's interesting to me, I remember being right at this spot with so many of you in the same group years ago with the economic sanctions, and we were honestly puzzling over how it could be that Joan Benet Ramsey, the young child who'd been so badly abused by her parents, and she was a national figure, and she was in people's minds and in the news day after day. It's not true to say that United States people can't feel compassion, but our compassion is orchestrated and controlled so much by major mainstream media. I do wonder, though, if the social media, and here I'm, way out on a limb that might crack any moment, because what do I know? It took me 20 minutes to send a text message on the train ride down here. But social media might perhaps communicate realizations that Americans aren't used to getting, and that can't be filtered out as easily. Certainly we see that in Egypt, they just didn't know what hit them when the social media was so available to people in many different parts of Egypt and different cities clamored simultaneously. It's interesting to see what's happening in Wisconsin right now also. 30,000 people gathered. That's quite something. Or the story of Ray McGovern, a real peace activist with a former history with the CIA, being beaten and bloodied during a speech by Hillary Clinton on freedom of speech. And he stands up and silently just stands up and turns his back, and he was hauled out and beaten by Washington, D.C. police. That story went all over the internet, and it's got traction and it's sticking. So I'm just wondering if we might be in for more educational opportunities than we've been accustomed to. But you're certainly right, we're not seeing the body bags coming back into the home communities. And it's actually the smaller towns that I think sustain the greater loss in terms of where the soldiers come from. I would encourage all of you to visit a website called Our Journey to Smile, and just get to know these Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers. They're an incredible lot, and they're very sturdy and dedicated, and kind of hear from their perspective as well.
Do you know Farsi or Arabic? Or because you were talking about compassion, and I think even if we choose to stay where we are, sometimes just learning the language of the people that we are affecting in the world is one way to feel compassion for another people. Like you said, go and see them on the internet, but learning the language is all. I mean, I'm 46 now, and it's really hard to learn a new language, but I was just wondering if you knew Farsi or Arabic.
Yeah, there's no substitute for being able to have some sense for the language, and I don't like United States prisons, I really don't, but I sometimes think, well, if I was going to get locked up again, give me an Arabic book to study or Farsi, and I'll be anyway, that's how I learned Spanish. I think it's great to study languages, and both of those languages are incredibly beautiful. So I have these what you can do sheets on the tables, and the last item I think is start a study group. And you can start with the Rosetta Stone, or find someone in the area who speaks one of these languages, and it's a wonderful, wonderful, engaging activity. And if you can get a couple young people in a study group with you, if you're my age and up, then that helps a lot too. But Voices did make a real commitment. We told the young people that we knew who kind of showed their aptitude for nonviolence that if they would go study in Syria, we'd bankroll it. And we almost couldn't pay the rent, but we got 3 speaking Arabic. And so that's been very good, and they've come back and done very great things. Josh just returned a month ago, and he's almost fluent. So it's a good investment. If somebody wanted to be kind and make a foolish investment, they'd send me. I try hard. But they're wonderful languages.
I really appreciate you coming and sharing your experience and story. I really had one question and one comment. The question is for me to really understand how the U.S., when you're there, how the soldiers receive you. And the second one is just from your comment about us having amnesia to these wars, certainly. But in the United States, because of media, we have been so thoroughly silenced and indoctrinated that we don't see the wars in our own community. And so I've been so disturbed by the lack of movement in this country over the greatest atrocity that is happening in urban areas around this country, and that is the brutality against young African American men. We have had that experience in this community, and we're numbed in some way to responding, and it is happening from coast to coast. The greatest human rights violation in the United States outside of the prison industrial complex itself. However, the majority of the people are absolutely silent on the issue.
Thank you very much. Could you tell us your name?
I'm sorry, my name is Carol.
Well, Carol, that's, it's horribly true, and in Chicago, it's not only police brutality, but police brutality in the service of, you could almost say, ethnic cleansing. When people want to reclaim a neighborhood and gentrify it, rehab the buildings, start schools, then all of a sudden watch how the youngsters will disappear. It's like a disappearance. And the process is that they're constantly harassed, they're constantly handcuffed, they're constantly up against the squad cars with their hands on the roof, and I've seen this in New York and Washington, D.C., as well as Chicago, every night, I'm talking every night, into these awful dungeons. You'll see the police leading in the young men, and God help any one of them that so-called smarts off to a policeman. There will be the youngster will find himself or herself thrown up against a wall, threatened, sometimes beaten. I remember, I myself had the experience that a U.S. military